Hello and welcome to the MacGuffin, and
The Red Herring.
I'm the MacGuffin,
And I'm the Red Herring.
and we're here to discuss Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. I think the show suffers,
And I love it.
so there's a lot of hater rants out there, and there's a handful of people that enjoy it, and so we're here to discuss both. Hope you like what we have to say, and if not, let us know in the comments. This week's episode of The MacGuffin and the Red Herring brought to you by Ye Old Gym, personal training and online fitness coaching. Find us on Instagram. Alright, so we start with the Harfoots, and Nori's chatting with Totally Not Gandalf.
Episode 5, The Partings.
And she says something about peril, dangers along the road. And he says, I'm peril. And he's right. I mean, he killed the fireflies. He broke her dad's ankle. He burned the star map. And she's like, no, you're good. And I'm like, well, there's not a lot of supporting evidence there. He's helped move your cart. Otherwise he's done a lot of, not intentionally, but done a lot of negative things. Or to our knowledge, not intentionally, because he might be Sauron. We don't know yet.
No, I think again this is one of those Tolkien rich sequences because like again getting to something we talked about last episode, fear, and whether or not you believe things out of fear. What motivates you to do things? Are you motivated by self-preservation? Are you motivated by making only yourself better at the cost of others? In here it shows that he's afraid of being peril, which in and of itself is a good trait. It's like when we look at the dialogue purely logically, like yes, he can be dangerous, but acknowledging all the subtext of, and again, even in our justice system, it's reflected this way, even though it's so hard to prove a lot of times, but the thing that truly proves whether a person is guilty or innocent, good or bad, comes down to motivation. And like, what are your motives? And that's invisible in Tolkien's time especially. It's kind of one of those mysterious inner workings of a person's soul that dictates whether or not they're good or bad. And sometimes just believing in a person can put them on the right path. And that's exactly what we got to see. And I love that. That's why this shot, I loved everything about it.
Is Eminem Sauron? Is not Gandalf Sauron? Those are my next two notes. Those are the only notes I have for the Harfoot section.
Traveling song. 10 points. 10 Tolkien points.
10 points to Tolkien.
Yep.
Next note is with the orcs.
Me too. Oh, we get introduced to the other bad guys that are hunting him.
The other misunderstood people that are just doing their job. No, yeah, these guys are bad guys.
Oh, here we go.
So here I have again, now the orcs melt in the sunlight again. Make up your mind. Do they burn or not? So here he holds out his arm. His thumb and fingers are exposed and not burning, but his forearm that is exposed is burning. So like, you just have the gloves cover his fingers if you're not gonna put the effect on his fingers too.
I mean, I won't disagree with you. I think this is absolutely a case of afterwards someone wasn't sure what they were supposed to be seeing, so they probably filmed it obviously without the effects. This is obviously done in post, where they added the reddening of the skin and the smokes and stuff. And I think probably what happened is someone was watching this down as it was filmed and was like, no, I don't think I'm walking away from the scene understanding how much pain the orcs in. So we need to add effects to it.
Yeah.
So I don't disagree with you. It is an inconsistency, but I think it does visually help tell you what's going on. If they didn't have it there might have been This is one of those things. They were making it in a box. they had to try to tell the story to the most people and make the most people happy without knowing what people's reaction would be. And so this is one of those things that made people, they made a decision that they thought would be better for people, and a lot of people didn't like it. I don't think you're alone in that call.
Yeah. But again, if you're doing that in post, just copy paste the effect on his thumb, on his fingers that are also exposed to the sunlight. Humans, I say they probably all should have run instead of hiding out in the tower. They should have just kept running until they got somewhere safe. But they decide to stay and fight. That's the only note I have here is they should have run.
The only note I have on this is the phrasing "King, you've awaited," and how that's another nod to Sauron. But this is one of those speeches. The speeches get picked on a lot in this one, and I remember the first time I watched this, I was a little more, as the kids say, cringe about it. But on a second and third watching, I definitely liked both speeches actually better. I thought her speech was kind of like. I thought her speech was at least got the job done, and then his coming in and being the bad guy was much more compelling.
Yeah.
This is one of those things. Is like it's hard for me to go back, and when I first watched this episode, her speech from at the top of the tower, I was just I walked away like a lot of people, kind of being like, that was no Ride to Ruin speech.
Yeah.
Which is a high bar, but at the same time, I was just like, felt a little lame. But on second and third watching, I definitely was like, you know what? No, actually, that was okay. It was pretty good. And then but the better speech was the bad guy speech.
Yeah.
Which I think kind of works for what they're trying to get across there. It's like, yeah, it's so much easier to give in to bad. Like, finding the right words to motivate people to be good is so much harder than finding the right words to make people make the wrong decision.
Yeah.
And that scene encapsulates that so well.
Yeah. I mean, make the right decision usually is, do you want to do what's hard? Make the wrong decision is usually, do you want to do what's easy?
Yeah.
So, all right. Back in Numenor, I have Elendil's not wrong. I don't know what about, but he's not wrong.
Shall we watch it real quick?
Yeah. So basically, Elendil is telling Isildur, you had opportunity to be exactly where you want to be, and you threw those opportunities away. And now you're asking me for nepotism to advance you beyond these people that have done exactly what you should have been doing.
Yep.
So I'm going to honor them for having done the right thing the whole time, and you need to figure out a new way to contribute.
Yeah.
So I did really like that. Elendil's not wrong there.
I like that this is also kind of one of those, we'll call it like seventh heaven kind of moments where like it just feels like a family sitcom kind of moment where it's like just a kid, he's trying to get better, but rather than just caving to this, it's like the dad has to fulfill his role and tell him to step up. Like anything besides that would have been a failing of a father.
You need to understand there are consequences for your actions. And while I love you and want what's best for you, that actually means I can't just fix everything for you.
Yep, 100%. So I love that sequence. It almost feels out of place to me in this world because of how sitcom-y in kind of, or not sitcom-y, how I'm just gonna use Seventh Heaven as like the example, but it feels so real worldy. Even like the lighting in that sequence, it's just kind of like It's just this kind of like dreamy, like, are you filming this on a set? Even though they are filming on a set, but I was like,
Yeah, right.
is this like the perfect home? Where are we right now?
I have smithing actually done correctly. I like the sword design. I will talk about the sword design in a later scene.
Yeah. I also,
Yep.
he forged a sword. That's interesting, dude.
Well, he finally got his smith's pin or whatever.
He could have forged a horseshoe. He could have forged a set of armor.
But
forged his sword.
But he's new in someone else's forge. I'm sure they were like, hey, this is what you're assigned to do today.
Yeah, it looked like it was like a test because the other dude kind of came out and was like, this is...
Yeah, and inspected it.
Yeah, inspected it. The thing he chose to forge as his example of his craft was...
Did he choose to forge it, or was he assigned to forge it?
Don't know.
See, we don't know that, so...
But
it's not like in Skyrim where you're like, hey, go make me an iron dagger. Now go make me a...
Could be. I thought it was poignant that he made a sword because it tells you what kind of smith he is.
Or it tells you what kind of culture they're in, and they're preparing for a war to go invade Middle Earth, and they need weapons. So I'm sure all the smiths are making swords.
You're 100% right, but I think that it's again, this is one of those points of poetry where it's like, yeah, preparing for war. He could have been making horseshoes. He could have been making armor. He could have been making anything else, but Sauron gets to make a sword, and we get to see that, like, yes, he is good at forging things that kill people. Like, it's one of those poetic.
Well,
it's
okay.
serendipitous.
Okay, let's try this. He's a blacksmith. People that make horseshoes are farriers.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay. He is a blacksmith, then. Yeah. I have notes on our D&D. I need to change that.
Queen meeting, Galadriel speaking for other people. Again, I think Halbrand clearly has no intention of returning to Middle Earth based on this scene.
Yeah. So, again,
as a matter of fact, it was my intention, and then she cuts him off.
Yeah. So this is exactly the scene I was referencing last episode, where it very much could be inside the writers and the directors' minds and the showrunners' minds that this was Sauron doing his thing, letting Galadriel say the thing that he set her up to say, but the actor is so darn good at just presenting as Halbrand that, like, we as the viewer on first watching have no way... There's no place for us to go but to accept that he wants to stay in Numenor.
Yeah.
But I think probably behind the curtain, it was always the showrunner's intention for this to be, Halbrand or Sauron doing his usual thing of, like, setting her up, getting the idea in her head, and then just giving enough resistance so that she feels like she really has to get stuck in this idea and own it.
And again, I'm gonna talk about that when we get to the end of the last episode. But I think there are things they could have done with his speech there to make me believe that.
Probably, yeah. Again, this is one of those things. I want to look it up again. I don't know where I heard it, but I heard that the actor himself didn't know that he was Sauron until kind of one of the last episodes.
And that's a trick that, like, as a director, you can get away with sometimes.
Yeah.
I
feel like if I was his agent, I would have a lot of words.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. You did not tell me how important he was, or I would have negotiated for a higher salary. And that's exactly why we didn't tell you who he was.
Or I was setting him up to brand him as a good guy.
Yeah.
And now he's the face of evil.
Yeah.
I think that choice to run it this way, to try to trick the audience. Essentially, they wanted everyone to be in Galadriel's, in the seat with Galadriel, of, like, totally believing that they have Halbrand figured out. But unfortunately, most people have read the books and they already knew who they were dealing with, and so they're like, "What? Wait, hold on. What?
And then, or there's an example in. Did you watch How I Met Your Mother?
Yeah, some of it.
There's in the scene where Marshall finds out that his dad dies. They didn't tell Jason Segel. They didn't tell the actor Jason Segel that was how that scene ended. He like got the script up until Lily gives you big news, and then like didn't tell him what the news was. And then she delivers that line, and so like his reaction to that is like genuinely him processing and figuring all of that out because he didn't have that section of script.
Got it.
So again, like you can pull tricks like that if you do them well.
Yeah.
Here, I guess it works okay.
Yeah, I mean it works well.
Yeah.
That shot.
I think that his portrayal of it and the way they have him working it works well. I think that the writing of how they wrap it up later does not, is maybe the fairest way to say it.
Yeah, like the scene is great. It's great at the surface reading, but once you understand that he is actually Sauron, you have a lot more questions going back.
Yeah.
You're going, wait a second. And then there's no acting there. There's no little tells for us to go back and be like, yes, okay. So we're missing a little bit of like just a glance and eyebrow rouse. Just a brief moment of self-satisfaction where he kind of goes like, I played you, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's all we would have needed, but
yeah,
we're missing it.
And then I have, how strictly are we defining alone? Because it sure looks like they're walking alone. I know there's like 5 of them, but as far as the whole herd of halflings go, or sorry, Harfoots go, those aren't wolf prints. Why didn't they just make the wolves wolves? We kind of talked about that in the first episode. Like, your horses are horses. Why aren't your wolves just wolves? And then here, not here. Here. Malva says, take their wheels and leave them. Again, sure doesn't sound like nobody walks alone, which is why I think the Harfoots are evil.
Well, they're definitely misguided, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they're kind of like we talked about earlier. Like the Harfoots, I think again, this is another tragedy of this series, is people wanted the Harfoots to be the hobbits, and so that's the expectations. They wanted them to be the representation of good in this world, and so when you hear things that are literally distortions, they're tweaking it's taking things that a hobbit might say in the best intentions, but then they're not living it the right way, and it's just kind of like a twisting, a manipulation of like kind of a corroded version of what they're saying. The songs that they're singing are they're not living that, and that's kind of like, yes, if you feel like they are being hypocritical, you've got it right. And that's the thing is like, they tried to put a little bit of that in there so that like just to reconfirm with the viewer, like if you feel this way, you have it right. You have the Harfoots figured right. You should think that they're hypocrites. They're not good. But people wanted so bad to be like, no, they're supposed to be good. Why are they being bad? It's because you don't understand. And like it's the same thing happened, I think, with Galadriel a lot. Where like she's supposed to be good. Why is she acting bad? We have to understand where we're at in the arc for all these characters. They're at the low point, and they need a hero to come in and lift them up. That's where we are in the arc, and that's just a tragedy of like, we're starting this story at the point of excitement. The most exciting point in time is like right when everyone is the most what's the word I'm looking for? Volatile, and the most, they could go this way, they could go that way. Also, I did have one point on Galadriel back in Numenor. Maybe you can cut this and put it back in.
Yeah.
But
I'll probably just leave it here and it'll be fine.
Okay, that's fine too. Galadriel had the line, many might assume you used me, she says after essentially giving him the throne. And that's one of the only tells that we get, like a concrete tell of like he's been manipulating her. And as much as, again, the character performance, the actor's performance does not match that. It is Galadriel speaking truth. Like, he is using her. He brought, she brought him to Numenor. She's gonna make a king out of him, give him an army. She's going to like set all these things up for him that he maybe might not have been able to achieve himself. But either way, it's just she's playing into his plans.
But that's purely based on the outcome. That's not at all based on what his interactions with her have set up. Because again, everything he said is, I want to be in Numenor, I want to smith here, I don't want to go back to Middle Earth.
Yeah.
So when she says like, well, I'm going to make you a king in Middle Earth, people might think that you used me to do that.
But remember, again, this is the manipulation thing where like he showed her this royal emblem, and said, "Oh, this old thing," and then he stuffed it back into his bosom, and was like, when they're on the raft, and she goes, "You're a king, aren't you?" He goes like, "Well, maybe I am, maybe I'm not." So she's like,
No, he doesn't say maybe I am, maybe I'm not. He says, "I found it on a dead man."
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. Is like he
says, "This is not mine. I found it on someone else."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he's letting other people, do his bidding without having to actually, like, he's letting them think it's their idea this whole time. And so that's like, that's when Galadriel points it out, she's speaking truth to it, and she says, like, some might assume that you're using me. She's actually speaking a lot of truth there. And she does this like throughout this season, where she kind of like says something that is like meta level true, and she doesn't even necessarily have awareness of, she's saying it offhanded, but she's speaking like high level truth. And I think it happened once earlier when she was with Elrond in Celebrimbor's, not Celebrimbor,
with Gilgalad.
With Gilgalad, yeah. Like, she says something that's just like meta level true, but nobody in the scene knows it's true. But it happens just like a couple times in this season where she's like says something that we need to know is true. Put a pin in that because it's true, but like, there's nobody in the scene knows that as a fact.
Yeah. So then I have Chekhov's wolf only took 5 episodes to fire. I do like this scene here where they're running from the wolf. I really like that. Everything dies down for a second. They give you just enough time to relax, and then the wolf, heavy on the air quotes, jumps across the screen.
Yeah.
I think that jump scare is super well set up. So again, like, the cinematography of it is well done, and there are things that they do really well.
Yeah, it's almost like this whole cast is super talented. Yeah, almost like it.
Yeah. Again, all of my complaints are with the writers. It's not with anybody else. Maybe the producers. There is an extinct genus of like pre-whale called an Andrewsarchus, and that's what these wolves look like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Did you know that at some point, I don't know if this was his end canon where he landed, but at one point Tolkien was running under the assumption that Middle Earth was actually prehistory Earth.
Yeah.
So that would be kind of cool.
Yeah. What's the there was another interpretation of that that I watched something on today where it was like it's real Earth, but in a different how did they say it? like viewed with a different insight or something, basically, where it's like you're seeing more of what's really going on than what we actually witness, something like that. Kind of like an alternate reality, but more like a
Interesting.
like this is our unseen world the same way they have their unseen world, kind of an interaction type thing. I'll have to watch that video again.
Yeah, that's cool. I hadn't heard that one before.
Not Gandalf wins. Also, he's like crazy strong the way he just throws that wolf around, and then that he throws one wolf and then all three wolves run away. I guess he like force boosts them.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have anything with the Harfoots before we get to? I have a lot to talk about with this.
This is probably going to be. I think the next note I have is Farazan's true colors show, Vision's return. I'm in Numenor, but I think that's actually much later after this. So
okay,
have at it.
So first of all, you shouldn't practice with live steel. You should get, and that is a complaint that a lot of people have, even in the Lord of the Rings movies, when Boromir is teaching the hobbits to fight. Like, they're fighting with real weapons. You shouldn't practice with real weapons.
Yeah.
We joke about that at my sword fighting class. We say, like, if I'm the knight in this region, my job is to train other fighters to help me maintain this region. So if we train with real swords and I accidentally kill one of you, then it's a pain and I have to train somebody else and I have to highlight.
There's so much paperwork involved.
Yeah, it's just... also, like, why are they practicing... This doesn't feel like a training ground. This feels like they're just in the street.
Yeah. This definitely feels like they had a cool set left over. They're like, yeah, we can use this spot.
Yeah. And then I say she is right. They do swing wild and clumsy.
So on an emotional beat, I have to say, I've loved this whole sequence. I know that it's totally just like eye fantasy, like kind of like, you were just getting our fantasy jimmies going, or like the elf gets to be cool, and we get to see him be like a schwarmy dad, kind of always up in the ante. It's very much just in there for you to like eat your popcorn and have a chuckle and just enjoy. This feels like a very popcorny sequence. I enjoyed the hell out of it, but I also like I've heard so much criticism of the actual choreography in this sequence that...
So there are criticisms I have. There are also, I will give them some credit. Like I said, in a couple of places there are things I've seen people complain about that I'm actually going to defend a little bit. However, first I'm going to critique. So she says there are many ways to kill an orc, like pretty much everything else. And then I have a note under this. This is just like an extrapolation. But like in battle, killing isn't necessarily the priority. You just need to wound them enough to get them out of the fight. So like if you watch Aragorn fighting the Uruk-hai to cover Frodo's escape, he's just hitting them wherever he can to make them
stop.
Not a consequence anymore. He's hitting them in the leg, hitting them in the arms. Same thing in like 300 actually does a really good job of this when Leonidas like breaks rank and is just mowing through Persians. Like he's just hacking off limbs, and then later they have that scene where they go around with spears and like finish off all the wounded soldiers of battle. They're just there to make you not a threat anymore, and then we'll deal with the rest of you later. Then and she says, but for you I will keep it strong and simple. I know I'm being nitpicky, but I feel like this is just trying to make it sound like she knows what she's talking about when the person who's writing her doesn't know what they're talking about.
How so?
Because keep it strong. Like if you're fighting, being strong helps. That seems like something obvious that you shouldn't have to say. And then as far as simple goes, fighting is not simple.
Sure.
There's, and this is a complaint I have with so many other things too. There's a statistic that's like the average American male believes he can fight approximately 3,000% better than what he actually can. And honestly, in the female population, I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same, just based on conversations I've had. But there are so many self-defense video techniques and all these things out there where it's like, oh, if you're in this situation, just do this one trick and you'll win. It's like, that's not how fight and physical confrontation works. And like, I wrestled growing up, I did kickboxing, I fenced in college, I did kung fu for a few years, I do harnish fechten now, I did jiu-jitsu for a little while. Like, I've experimented with a lot of different things, and in none of them is there a magic technique that just works. So the idea of keeping things simple, if you want simple, you don't use a sword. There's a reason the spear is the most ubiquitous weapon in all of history. They're easy to make, and they're easy to teach someone how to do this with. Mm-hmm. So, I think again, that feels like trying to make it seem like she knows something that the writer of her doesn't know.
Yeah, I think so. That's one of those things. Is like, I think criticism of like the techniques that she's giving is like 100% valid, but also like the point of this scene is that essentially she's looking at these people and they're like they have no. She's getting their stats right. Mm-hmm. She's like, orcs stronger, but you're not nimble enough to do the elf techniques I would normally teach you. Mm-hmm. So she's calling them all stupid to their face. She's saying you are strong and simple. So I'm going to teach you a technique that is both strong and simple. So like that's like the point of her dialogue, but I wish they had brought in like somebody who could have said like, if you had to teach somebody one technique, and maybe they did bring in somebody who's like,
based on the technique they chose, they did not bring someone in.
So I'm just like, there's all sorts of people in Hollywood, but like if you had to teach, if they were about to go off to a war and you knew that they were probably gonna get their asses kicked anyways, and you had like one thing you could give them, one tip, what would it be? I'm like, okay, well, I guess it would be this.
I'm going with Farazan. Last episode, we had 10 days before we leave.
Sure.
I can teach someone to be fairly effective with a sword in 10 days.
Okay. So, maybe
I've taught fairly physically lacking in self-awareness people.
You looked at me when you said
just to involve you in the conversation.
Oh, interesting.
In an hour and a half, I've taught people 3 sword techniques, not 1 sword technique in 10 days. Just saying. And then the technique she picks is stab, twist, gut. To which I say, what if they're wearing armor? What if they have a shield? What if they're not totally incompetent and they move? What if they do a hanging guard sweep to a molinet and I don't have a shield even though I'm using a single hand weapon and should definitely have something in my other hand? What if I'm using a sword that's not designed for thrusting? Yeah. That sword doesn't have a spear point. It has an off-centered point to a curved single edge. Mm-hmm. That sword is not designed to stab things with. So again, it's oversimplified. There is no magic technique, and there are so many variables that she's not accounting for in this strong, simple instruction.
Yeah. I think the one thing here's like from the actual fighting technique. Here's the trade-off, right? Because I don't know how many people understand enough about specifically using swords for like if you put that much effort into to making, I was thinking about this with when we were talking about the Harfoots hiding their wagons thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what level do you write for
Mm-hmm.
in this? Because there's a lot of people who, like, if you showed them something any less simple than what this is something that everyone can understand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's not accurate, it's something that most people, the average viewer could watch it and be like, oh, I understand why that would be effective. And it's kind of the same with the Harfoots and the wagon observation, where it's like, I feel like at some point they probably had the conversation of like, how actually camouflaged do you want these wagons?
Mm-hmm.
And at some point the director had to go, I've got 4 seconds. I'm dealing with all this different range of people who are going to be watching this at all sorts of different ranges. Just let us see the wheels so we know that there's a wagon under the bush. So like at some point they had to make a creative decision of like, this is what's actually going to be in the scene, because we have to make sure everyone's on board with what we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if do you know of a technique that would be as easy to read as like, yeah, that seems deadly, and is like, if you were in Galadriel's point and you had to hand it to a bunch of people who are about to go die and face orcs,
Mm-hmm.
what would be your technique?
Mine would be, it's called a molinet, which I mentioned a second ago, and it's you do a hanging guard, so your blade is pointed down.
Mm-hmm.
You block whatever the incoming blow is,
Mm-hmm.
and then you rotate your wrist and return a cut, which works for the design of their sword and gives them some defense, since she doesn't talk about any kind of protect yourself.
Yeah.
And since they don't have shields, even though they should have shields if they're using single-hand weapons that aren't rapiers. But
Yeah.
even with rapiers, we see a lot of examples of people using a dagger in their offhand, or a buckler in their offhand,
Yeah.
or a cape in their offhand, or something in their offhand.
Yeah.
Use both hands. If you're fighting, if you have 2 hands and you're fighting, use both hands.
Your life depends on it.
That's the rule. If you can put something in your other hand, if you can put a rock in your other hand to block incoming swords with, pick up a rock. Have something in both hands.
Don't go at it half-assed, because
Yeah.
it's your life.
Yeah.
Cool. Also, there's another thing I was going to bounce off of that. God, now I'm forgetting, because your answer was cool. I like it. Oh, writing wise, here's where my writing beef comes with this sequence. I wish whatever technique that she showed them was the technique that the Lieutenant Valandil uses to score the tag on her. Because I think he does score it technically with a thrust. I can't remember for sure, but like, I want it to be like distinctly obvious that like, he used the technique that she taught them to gain a station. Because we're talking like we pointed out with the dad scene, like, we're looking for people of discipline, of duty, of caliber on this journey. And so if we wanted to get the narrative juicy bits in this sequence, I would have loved to have seen whatever technique she's teaching them. And maybe I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong in the comments if he does in fact use the technique that she teaches them. But I didn't catch it if that was the case.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see it. We're about to watch it.
Goodbye.
I will say I do like the use of textile armor or cloth armor. It looks like they're all wearing gambesons under their jerkins. That's, I don't know how well you can see on my armor back there, but anyway, I wear one of those cloth padding things under my armor because they're good to wear, and we don't see a lot of textile armor on screen, so I do appreciate that. Okay, so now we start training the new recruits. We will see who can score flesh. That line gets a lot of hate. I actually don't hate it. I think it makes the point.
I love that he ups the ante.
Yeah.
And that like Galadriel's on board with it so much.
Yeah.
There's just so much like camaraderie and fun parts in this that I dig.
Yeah. So the stance he goes into is it's a longsword or greatsword stance. This is not a longsword that he's using.
It doesn't have he's like giving it up like half a body.
Yeah.
By putting his arm on his back arm.
Mm-hmm. But I do say like I'm gonna forgive the bad stance on account of him being green since she's supposed to be like training them. But also as members of the Sea Guard, I feel like they should have a baseline of training before this. But I'm gonna forgive that because he's supposed to be new. Now if we watch this, he aims off target. Oh, it's so fast. Basically, he aims off target, so she turns to evade his attack. Mm-hmm. If she did not turn, he still would not have hit her based on where he was aiming. Yeah. Now, when you're doing choreography, there are safety concerns, so you never actually aim at the person you're fighting. Mm-hmm. But then you need to show us a camera angle that doesn't directly show the fact that her center of mass does not move.
Does her center of mass not move at all?
No. Right here maybe? So she literally just spins sideways. Had he aimed at her belly button, he would have stabbed her through the ribs. Yeah. However, I'm going to defend this also because I have read stories about soldiers, especially in like Vietnam when it was their first time seeing combat, aiming high because they just couldn't get over that emotional hurdle of hurting or killing another person. So one, they're just training right now, so he's not actually trying to kill her. Two, maybe he needs to get his mind past that breaking point. So there are things that I will forgive about that, even though I think a simpler option would have been just move the camera 90 degrees.
I wonder if it would have worked for the understanding. This is just me going in and like trying to pick apart because I think that is a good suggestion. But I wonder if maybe in that shot we couldn't quite understand that like when she turns sideways that's a close miss. Because if she just turns sideways and we're seeing it straight on, the blade going in front of her, we might not understand that the intention of it is that she is moving like this at the right time, versus like at a 90-degree angle, right? Like it doesn't quite. Have to do it with.
But at a 90-degree angle, you're gonna see. So if this is her body and this is the sword coming in, you're gonna see the sword lined up with her, and you're gonna see her turn as the sword goes by. So as long as you get the timing of this part where it crosses from not being in line with her body to being in line with her body, as long as you get that timed up with the view of the camera, it's gonna look really, really close. You could be 8 inches off and it's gonna look super close. I'll show you later. I have some fight choreography that I shot with someone recently, and there's a lot of things like that where it's like I'm swinging super wide, but because of the angle of the camera, it looks like I'm trying to cut her head off.
They probably wanted to get. Again, this is like, I trust the DPs because as you've commented, like they're all fantastic. So they made the decisions they made for a reason. I think maybe they're trying to get some of Galadriel's face in there.
Yeah.
They're probably trying to get like, because I think they were also self-aware enough to be like, this fight is not going to be legit. Like we're gonna have an elf sword fighting. It's not gonna be legit. So let's get the emotional impact that we want.
And then I say I'm gonna forgive him telegraphing all of his blows because that's all he's ever done, and clearly no one's corrected him yet. And then this one, I'm being a little facetious with some of these. This next one, I actually am serious about. So he swings big, swings way out of line. So here, she gets a lot of flack because she has the back the back edge of the sword pointed at him, not the sharp edge of the sword.
Mm-hmm.
So people are like, if you're threatening someone, you put the sharp edge at them, not the flat edge. But
you shouldn't be using a sharp edge at
you
all.
shouldn't be using. Yeah. Well, and I say, I'm going to forgive her using the back edge of a single-edged weapon because she's demonstrating dominance without actually trying to hurt people. Again, if they were not practicing with live steel, she would not have to compromise proper technique for safety. So,
Yeah.
practice with the right tools. Use the right tools for the right task. It's like we said in episode 1. The first thing you learn in shop class, you don't use a screwdriver as a chisel. You don't use a chisel as a screwdriver.
I have, though.
I mean, we all have, but you don't. Kids at home,
Don't do it. You're going to ruin the handle of your screwdriver.
Yes.
Trust me.
And you're gonna dull your chisels. Those are the outcomes. Then there's dialogue I have a note about here. Swordsmanship is about balance rather than strength. Fight with your feet, not with your arms. It's like, honestly, both is good. Strength helps a lot in a fight. And she says, use your legs, not your arms. I can say from experience, because of the way we fight, it is much easier to fight with no legs than with no arms. With our fighting rules, if someone hits you in the leg, you don't have a leg anymore. So you fight from your knees or sitting on your ankles, depending on if you get hit in the hip or just the leg. If you get hit in the arm, you fight without that arm. And I have lost both my arms in a fight. I lost that fight. I've lost both my legs in a fight, and I won that fight. So, and I say that fight. This has happened several times over the last 7-8 years I've been doing this. And again, like, it's supposed to sound like wise and insightful. It just comes across as oversimplistic. If it was just a line like be mindful of your footwork instead of fight with your feet, not your arms, then it would make the exact same point, but do it in a way that is befitting to reality. Then she starts fighting multiple opponents. If you outnumber your opponent, do not trade blows, attack together. Good job for Galadriel, though, keeping all of her opponents on the same side and not letting them surround her. For now. Eventually that changes, but... there's a disarm in here that just should not work. He literally just, like, grabs his sword and takes it from him. Like, if he held on, she would not be able to do that disarm.
I think that seems vaguely derivative, like a pistol disarm that I know. Where it's like you pull from the back grip, mm-hmm. and then by the time you get to the index, which is where your real grip is on the tool, that you've already lost it.
Yeah.
Because you're fighting your main index finger grip against their pinky grip strength. So you have a better...
But again, if she taught them how to Molinet, when she started lifting that, he could just rotate his wrist along with her.
Sure.
And come back.
But she did it. She did.
She
did it on purpose.
Yeah. she wants them to die.
It's her portents. She knew it.
And then I have all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
And then I have there's a lot here. I'm just gonna move on, but I think I made the key points. And then she makes this point about Halbrand when he kicks the sword up off the ground and catches it. So here, Halbrand kicks up the sword, and she says, "Never known a smith's aide who could do that." I was like, "What? Pick up a sword?"
So from the ground.
Yeah, I had to kick up a sword for a play. Nailed it on the first try. It's not that hard.
Oh, good for you.
Also, I'm sure as a blacksmith, he's dropped a sword in his shop before and gone, "Oh, I don't feel like bending over to pick that up. I'm just gonna."
Wouldn't it look cool if I did this? No, I just think it's an interesting point to bring in. He was because they made a point to show him observing the fight.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's necessary from a narrative standpoint to show that Halbrand has strategic prowess as well. He knows his way around a fight. He knows his way around a sword. And so he's watching this fight. I do kind of wonder if that's gonna pay off like in later seasons too, but we'll see.
Counselor and Son, I have no notes. Do you have anything for this scene?
Only that this I love that they put this in here because so far Farazan has seemed like he complies with all of the Queen's things. Like we know that he's got everyone underneath his thumb, and we can sense that he's in a dangerous position. But because he's always seemed like he's on the same side as the Queen, this is the first time when we really see like, no, he's playing a power game. He's playing the long game. So I love this sequence. I love the way that it shows the father-son dynamic between them. Yeah, God, he's such an awesome villain. He's so bad. I hate him. But he's like a bad guy. Like, you know, we have Adar, but I also think Farazan is one of those characters that's like, what a great villain. Like, you can kind of understand where he's coming from. You know what makes him tick and what drives him to be the bad guy that he is, but he's such a good villain. I love him and I hate him.
Do I hate that I love him, or do I love that I hate him?
I love that I hate him, for sure.
I hate that I love that I hate him. No, that isn't. King's Chamber, I also have no notes. Do you have anything for this scene?
All that awaits you is darkness. The line from the king. All that awaits you is darkness.
Mm-hmm.
How prophetic, how poetic. Because later on, again, if you haven't watched the whole season already, spoilers.
Yeah.
Because she becomes blinded. She's both going into metaphorical darkness, and she's literally going to be blinded, which I think is really cool.
And they're gonna block out the sun.
There's
like so much darkness.
Mm-hmm.
They should call it like the Dark Land.
Interesting. But there's so many. I still haven't quite found. I appreciate the motif of vision in here, and I definitely I get the sense that vision. So there's like in Tolkien, we play a lot with, at least in this series, we play a lot with hearing as kind of like the threads of unseen forces, and sight being kind of like what moves. I don't want to say like it's almost like materialistic, like it almost, because it is the seen world, but like, and I haven't quite cracked the code on it yet, but I definitely feel it. I feel it in here that there's this motif of vision, both literal visions, sight, and how I think it kind of plays on, this is me pulling at straws here, but like, because we're so hardwired that when we see things, we react to it quicker. Mm-hmm. So there's a certain amount of conscious reactivity that happens whenever you get visual stimuli, versus the hearing. Whenever we hear things, it goes more to our subconscious. And so there's that kind of played out throughout this whole season. And I haven't found a good way to articulate it. I'm not even sure if it is, I don't even know if it's a conscious decision by the show creators, but it definitely feels like they're playing with those motifs of like the eyes popping open, visions, you get visions whenever you're reacting. Apologies. And, hearing being like this subconscious driver, because again, it's the music of Eru Iluvatar or Melkor, kind of like playing with your mind.
Yeah. Here I have, is not Gandalf Sauron? Is that playing? Play. Nori knows nothing about this guy, tries to get him to stop when he's healing himself, gets hurt in the process, and then she's like afraid of him. Every time he's hurt someone else, he was good and not Peril and misunderstood. But as soon as that misunderstanding is her fault and hurts her, now she's afraid.
Yeah, I think like it's just that thread of doubt. It's a good character beat, but I mean, she does get over it too.
Yeah.
But I think that this is, I have to apologize, but this is a lesson that's been repeatedly driven into me by watching Moana, the Disney film Moana. If you have your hero just be right without failing, or having a real tangible understanding of what other people are afraid of, then their bravery doesn't seem warranted. So she has to understand the fear of the others. It's like she has to have a little bit of concern for her own well-being that she can get over to become a hero. And that's I learned it in Moana, because that's a one of those great moments where like her dad doesn't want to go beyond the reef, and if she just ran away from home and she made it over the reef on her first try, that's not a hero's journey. That's just, you got luck. You're a spoiled little rich kid. But she has to fail her first attempt of going over the reef so she can understand the fear, to prove to earn the badge of bravery, becoming the hero. And I think that's what this was for Nori. Is like she has to like really understand for herself the dangers of this stranger. To, have any valid narrative legs to stand on when she's like, no, I want to believe you're good, even though you hurt me.
Linden dinner. Where did you get the table? Oh, so he asks. Durin asks Gil-galad where he got the table, and then Gil-galad never tells him where he got the table. I was like, but where did you get the table? This is another one of your questions that gets asked but not answered.
Exactly. This is one of those things that's like, how do you call bullshit to a king? Because the king is pressing him for some, I forget exactly how it goes on. Can we watch the scene real quick? Sure. Yeah, that's the counter. So Durin counters with, I have an honest inquiry to you, because Gil-galad's being dishonest in the way that he presented. So this is kind of one of those things. It's like the dishonesty of the elves is meant to be portrayed, I think, as coming from Gil-galad, kind of like having secrets, having hidden motivations, and Elrond is kind of like willfully naive to it, but he's just eager to get in the fold with the dwarves. But anyway, so this is where it comes to a head, where like, how do you call a king out on his BS? I mean, because he's a king, and he's like, he's the king of the elves. So like, when he says, it is such BS when Gil-galad says like, oh, I thought you would be tough enough to stand up to an honest inquiry. It's like, you're not you're not really being honest. You're being underhanded. Your motives have been obscured. Like, how do you say that to a king? And so that's when I love that Durin just flips it back and says like, there's a reading of this scene that I don't know if it's how they intended, but I'd be willing to bet that someone in the room at least thought about it, that like the High King probably does know where this stone comes from, but he's not willing to call his guests out to his face, because it says, oh, if we're gonna make up stories right now, Durin says, if we're gonna make up stories right now, you're gonna let me make up some BS about where this comes from. So later on, and I think we even see it, Gil-galad is like sitting back down and like drinking wine off of it, like he's totally forgot about how sanctimonious this rock is. Probably because he knows that Durin is blowing smoke out of his behind anyways. but that's just such a great way of being like, oh, we're gonna play word games. We're gonna pretend to be polite. Okay, we'll be polite, and we'll get nowhere for it. That little look there between Elrond going back to Gilgalad, where he believes the best in Durin and he believes the best in Gilgalad. So he's like kind of willfully naive of Gilgalad, but as somebody who's as astute as he is, like he sure buys Durin's story. Like maybe he is just a little bit naive where he doesn't catch up on his own friend's BS there. Yeah. But that just kind of shows you how much he will, like, he is caught in the middle, literally. Yeah. And these two people who correctly are like, you know, I think the dwarves are up to something. I think the elves are up to something. They are actually right. And Elrond's kind of like caught in the middle. Mm-hmm. And he buys both of their propaganda. Yeah. Yeah. That was another aspect that I think a lot of people had problems with because it's a made up piece of lore for the show. Yeah. I think it's cool.
Again, I'm in the camp of it's self-contained. Like, as long as you can make it make sense for the sake of this show, like, I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the spirit that you have to go into this particular show in particular, but yeah, I think that set off a lot of people, but I still think it's cool, even if it's not 100% backed by what was in the Silmarillion.
Yeah. This line here, he says, as strong and unyielding as evil implies good cannot be strong or unyielding. I think that's an interesting takeaway, maybe to phrase it passively.
Almost like perhaps Galadriel is strong and unyielding.
And she's evil?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so here I have Elrond basically like instantly just gives up the secret he swore to protect. They find out the tree is dying, and he's like, oh, I swore to Durin that I would not tell you they found Mithril 3.275 miles down in Mineshaft 23 just behind the door with the password rhythm of a children's rhyme. Like, in this scene, he tells everything while claiming, like, that he made a promise he's not breaking. Like, you're breaking the promise by telling that you made this promise.
Did the dwarves find the orb or not? I swore an oath to Durin.
That basically just tells him everything. So, hope is never mere, Elrond, even when it is meager. Mere and meager are synonyms. That's it. They mean the same thing. Mm-hmm. So, I think that line should have been reworked. Also, Gilgalad knew Galadriel was right, gaslit her and punished her and sent her away, instead of esteeming her and using her to raise elves to fight.
Didn't he say it happened right after she left, though?
No, he says that he thought she thought that she was the part of the reason it was happening, because she was holding on to the evil that was holding it, or something like that.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. Well, he hasn't seen her yet, so he can't. He tested his theory. Yeah. It was wrong. He hasn't had a chance to apologize yet. So he wasn't gaslighting her. He genuinely thought she was the last vestige of the war and the evil and whatnot.
Yeah. Isildur's apology, I actually like this scene. Until they say the sea is always right, because the sea had nothing to do with anything. I muted that. So during Isildur's apology, I actually like this scene. Until they say the sea is always right, because the sea has nothing to do with anything that happens during this scene. The way they use it makes it feel like he's crediting or blaming the sea.
The sea is always right.
That's it. So Isildur's horse gets recruited,
Mm-hmm.
and they say like, "Sorry, the horse is going. The sea is always right." Like the sea had nothing to do with the choice to bring the horse on this expedition.
Also, but Tom was,
Not the brightest bulb in the chandelier.
yeah, he's a good
Not,
guy.
not the brightest candle in the
Mm-hmm.
candelabra.
Yeah, he's a real good guy though.
Yeah. Otherwise, I really like this scene. I like that whole scene up until he says the sea is always right about something that the sea had nothing to do with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but he's also.
Isildur's stowing away.
I hate the stowaway sequences because it shows just how low both of these privileged children are. They're just like,
yeah.
he's like, I'm gonna burn down a ship just to make my point. Oh, you're a stowaway? You're literally gonna stow away just to get what you wanted? Oh wow, they're like just both so despicable, and the fact that they cover for each other is because they're being selfish.
Yeah.
Oh, this is like Ferris Bueller on steroids for me, where it's like, I get it. It's the like kind of rascal stereotype, and it's there for some people, but it does drive me nuts. I have a hard time getting behind these characters. I don't think you're supposed to, but like, I have a really hard time stomaching watching these characters and not just chastising them.
And I have here like, they seem a little Elendil seems a little quick to accept their sort of far-fetched story about, oh, a cask went up. And that's the thing too, is like, I said, like, that's a big explosion for wine. When a cask goes up, that's a cask of gunpowder, not a cask of wine.
Well, it's oil, right? That's what they were spilling. They were spilling like lamp oil.
I thought it was wine.
I thought it was oil.
But even at that, oil burns; it doesn't explode.
Yeah. This might just like, I agree. The explosion is.
Yeah.
Probably they don't have any excuse for it, but if you wanted to show a viewer like, whoa, look how bad this was, you have to do the old Hollywood thing of doing an explosion.
I think that what it was is someone had heard the phrase "a cask went up and destroyed the ship," and they knew that wine gets transported in casks, and that's the conclusion they drew.
For somebody who really likes and praises the talent that's on this show, you sure don't cut them a lot of slack.
I said my issues are all with the writers.
But your problems are more with the prop people.
The writers are the ones that said a cask went up. Sure. Yeah, in this case, yeah, it's a team effort.
I'm just saying, like,
it's a team effort. The writer should have put something different.
You really praise the talent of these people in there, but then you're so quick to call them idiots.
Well, sometimes they're idiots.
I don't think they are. I think they're making very well informed choices, and they're very talented people. Obviously, time. Galadriel gets triggered. Right. This is another example of like them saying we need a little bit more time, and Galadriel says, "You ain't got time." How does she know that? Because again, this is another example I think of a little bit of portents, a little bit of like that just ingrained trauma of like her. She's like complacency. We never have enough time. Like they're waiting for our guard to be down for evil to strike. So I don't know how much of that is just wisdom, how much of that is portents. But Galadriel hears we need more time, and she says no. It might be extremely important, down to the minute.
Yeah.
Of which we ride over that hill.
Yeah.
When the sun's behind us.
And the timing of that is wrong too, and I'll talk about that when we get there. Alright, so here we're back in Lindon. Elrond and Celebrimbor again. Elrond swore the secret would die with him, and then he shares the mithril with Celebrimbor. Celebrimbor, who already knew about the mithril because Gil-galad already knew,
even though it was Elrond's idea to include the dwarves to build the forge, maybe if Elrond had asked the obvious question, why do you need the forge by spring, he could have been more involved. And then he says, unless I break an oath and betray a friend, an oath that you've obviously already broken because you showed the mithril to Celebrimbor. And then I say there's a good manipulation from Celebrimbor calling upon Elrond's father when Elrond had just told Durin the story about his dad. But everything about this, I'm like, Elrond has broken his oath at least twice.
I mean, like,
in the last 2 scenes.
Yeah. It's kind of one of those things that's like, everyone's making the grayest right choice in both circumstances because he's technically keeping his oath by not blatantly giving it away, or at least not collaborating with the elves. And he lets them know that what they're doing is morally wrong and we can't do it without the dwarves' consent. In the subtext of how he phrases it. So it's kind of like one of those things. It's like, does Elrond give the information to them? Yes. He does, but he also doesn't. So he essentially says, I'm not going to collaborate with you because I'm not going to betray my friend. So I'm not on board with this. Whatever you choose to do with this information, that's on you guys, but it's not moral to do without their consent. Mm-hmm. So like that's kind of like Elrond's being kind of a moral compass for the elves and reminding them that like doing this is not okay. And reminding them of the good so that they don't overstep their bounds, which they clearly intend to do to everybody at this point. They're like, yeah, these elves, Durin the Third is right to be suspicious of them because they'll clearly overstep their bounds. And then at the same time, like, when it goes back to like Durin and stuff, like he's clearly heartbroken about all of this, and he immediately goes and fesses up to it. The first chance that he gets, he's like, listen, dude, something bad's really going on, but I need you to know the subtext. Mm-hmm. Like that, he immediately goes to correct the thing. So I don't think this shows him as like being morally bankrupt. It's just that he's playing with a really bad hand, and not everyone. The elves have been trying to take advantage of him.
Mm-hmm. Which again, had he asked one question in episode 2, he could have been in on it from the start, and then could have handled things better and differently.
Sure, but that's like every movie or story. Like if somebody had made a phone call or had done something differently. But I don't disagree with that question.
That's something too. Like I hate stories that rely on lack of communication. Mm. Like I don't like conflict that way. I've seen a couple rare instances where it is done super, super well, and in all of those instances, it's because every character thinks they are fully communicating everything. They're just communicating poorly, as opposed to like willfully miscommunicating. There's an episode of Modern Family where everyone in the family is like snuck into this super high-end ritzy hotel, and it's 20 minutes of miscommunication, and it's 20 minutes of the best television I've ever seen.
Nice.
They just, because again, everyone thinks,
we're
we're having this conversation, we're on the same page, we know exactly what, but each person is thinking about something completely different based on what they're talking about, and it's phenomenal.
Right. That's like, that's gold when people pull that off.
Yeah, but normally I hate storylines that rely on just lack of communication or poor communication or intentionally not communicating.
Your voice at that meeting may well decide whether this mission stands or falls.
So this is an important point here, because Sauron, we have to remember Sauron, this guy right here, has a choice to stay in Numenor at this point. He's giving up a verbal rebuttal here, knowing that she's going to push back on it because she's a galloper. That's our Galadriel. But ultimately, he has a choice. He doesn't have to show up to that council, and he does. Which, again, this is one of those.
Does he have a choice? Because I'm pretty sure like armed guards show up to escort him there.
I can't. We'll watch it again, but
Yeah.
I just remember that there is a reveal of him in the room, and it's it's a like, oh, by the way, he chose to show up, and I think that that's important because it's just one of those things. It's like it's another, to me, indicator to the 4D chess Sauron thing. He's like I could have chosen to stay behind, but we're meant to, on first watching, interpret it as, oh, he chose to be the good guy. He really is an Aragorn character. But in second watching, you go like, he chose to go along with his plan that he put in Galadriel's head all along.
Yeah.
And
Not so long ago, men like me were fighting alongside them.
Men like you, not you yourself.
You're Isildur's heir, not Isildur himself.
yeah, did that bother you when you first
Yeah.
watched it? Okay.
Yeah.
By servants of
So
Sauron,
she
is
said
that
by
enough?
servants of
This is
Sauron.
about vengeance.
One cannot satisfy thirst by drinking seawater.
Then what if
Alright, so then I have world building fantasy colloquialism. One cannot satisfy thirst by drinking seawater. While true, not sure it's a great parallel for vengeance. Like, just. Again, it's one of those things where it's like there had to be a better way to say that.
why do you keep fighting?
Because I can't stop.
So I have a quote from the band Power Man 5000. There's a lyric, what is it really that motivates you? The need to fly or the fear to stop? And so when he's just like, why do you do this? And she's like, because I can't stop. It's like, oh, the fear to stop. That's what motivates you.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
Yeah, I think in this scene, like, just to like put an actual narrative piece of commentary on there too, is like, that's like her acknowledging.
Oh yeah, I have that right here.
Yeah.
She's kind of admitting that she's become so enveloped in rage she's incapable of seeing anything else in her life.
Yeah, which is like, it's actually kind of gets. I think that's the breaking point for her. If we look across the whole season, this is actually the breaking point for her because she acknowledges the evil in her. It's kind of like that old saying of like, the greatest trick the devil ever did was tell you that he doesn't
Convincing the
exist.
world he doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, as soon as she recognizes in herself that she has that evil, like, Sauron, of course, is so, as a servant of the evil, he's so like, you can't resist this. He believes that most people can't resist the call of evil, and so he thinks he's won in this moment. But we as Tolkien fans know that this is the exact moment that actually probably saved Galadriel, because if she went to Middle Earth without having this moment, not acknowledging the evil within her, she probably would have just like, I'm fine, and been the Dark Queen that he wants her to be. But in a weird twist, like, this is probably the moment her acknowledging her faults was what allowed her to say, oh yeah, no, I need to get rid of that. So this is the beginning of her redemption arc, which will probably take seasons and seasons and seasons to fulfill, because she doesn't actually redeem herself until the Lord of the Rings, when she denies the ring.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we're ever going to see her fully redeem herself in the course of this series.
Yeah. I actually kind of disagree, though. I think that when she's in that mindset of all I am is death to Sauron, I think that at that point, if he says, be my queen, she just shanks him. Like,
Sure, yeah.
no, you're dying now. I think that the fact that she breaks here actually gives her a moment of contemplation of like, oh, maybe
That's what I'm saying.
I should be the
queen and let Sauron live and reign, because she, spoiler alert, does let him live.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding what your point
I think that she would be less inclined to be his queen had she not had this moment.
Maybe. You might be right. But, again, this is kind of one of those things, is like, this is very Tolkienian, where it's like, you have to touch the darkness. I hate using that quote too for the Tolkien outside of this series, but like she has to kind of learn this lesson and become a better person too. Like she won't be the good person she needs to be later without acknowledging that evil either. So like, on the one hand, I think you're probably actually 100% right. But at the same time, she needed to have this moment to acknowledge it so that she can be redeemed later. Because, again, like everyone who's gone to therapy, like, the first step is acknowledging that you have a problem. If she never acknowledges that she had a problem, she's just going to go, oh, you're my target that I've been hunting all these years? Stab, stab, stab.
Yeah.
God, that was great. Like, no one can stop me. And it might have taken another couple thousand years, but she would have eventually been evil.
So in here she says, we muted. She says, my closest friend conspired with the king to exile me. Elrond thought she was being given a great honor. Like, he didn't conspire to exile her. The king was conspiring to exile her, but Elrond wasn't. Elrond thought she was being honored.
Yeah, but this is also like, this is Galadriel understanding who her friend is too a little bit here, because she understands that he is sometimes a tool, sometimes very persuasive, and that he is oftentimes used as a persuasive tool. So like, she knows that Gilgalad was behind the exiling of her. But Elrond didn't view it as such. He did view it as an honor.
Yeah.
But
the king used my friend to exile me or something. Not because here she's acting like Elrond helped mastermind the plan.
But this is her in a dark place too. Like she's saying like, this is maximum paranoia. Like she's saying like, the king's exiling me, which is kind of true, but also like he had good intentions. Like she's in her dark place right now, so these are all paranoid thoughts, is how I always took this.
Yeah.
She doesn't really believe that. If she got in the same room as Elrond, she could not say that to him, because she doesn't genuinely believe that of her friend. It's just that this is like, again, she's isolated right now. Another isolation shot. Like, even literally this shot is set up so that she feels isolated and like cut off by Sauron. But like, she's in her own head with her paranoid thoughts. She doesn't fully believe this, but God, that's we all know, like, when we've had those bad thoughts, we all can identify a little bit with Galadriel here, where we think like, oh, so-and-so probably got me off of the wrestling team or whatever. Like,
yeah.
No, they probably didn't, and you probably know that too, but
yeah,
I know that feeling.
There's a comedian I like, Brad Stein is his name, not to be confused with Ben Stein, speaking of Ferris Bueller. Brad Stein has a thing about how Protestants see Satan everywhere. He's like, Satan made me do this and do that, and Satan made me lose my job. He's like, no, your incompetence made you lose your job. He parallels it with, he's like, Catholics see Mary and Jesus everywhere, Protestants see Satan everywhere.
Yeah.
Halbrand says he's sorry. Galadriel does not understand moving on. She tells Halbrand becoming a smith won't ease his pain, but she's never tried it. Oh, and then I have a quote from V for Vendetta where he says, hate was all I knew. It taught me how to eat, how to drink, how to breathe. I thought I would die with all the hate in my veins. But even at that, V is still capable of letting others make decisions for themselves. My next notes are with the orcs. Do you have any more on this scene?
Nope, other than it's brilliant. This sequence is, again, I love all the sequences that are Halbrand and Galadriel because there's so much like high opera kind of going on. Mm-hmm. The only thing I don't like is how unfortunate it is that the actor and the stage directing is play Halbrand straight.
Yeah.
We never get like a little... And it works for first viewing.
Like right there, if you just narrowed his eyes a hair, it would have fed to what you're saying about second viewings.
Yeah. And it's again, I think this show works better on multiple viewings. The first viewing through is kind of like you're not really sure what to think, but you're just kind of along for the ride. And then on second viewing, you can go back and kind of like digest it more. Mm-hmm. And my hope is, and what I suspect will happen, is that like in 5-10 years from now, this show will actually be really, really, like people will actually really, really adore it because they will have watched it enough times that they'll start catching things. But I think the first season is always going to have been kind of one of those things is like, dang, I just wish that there was a little bit more of a nod to Halbrand being Sauron.
I think that when you lose over 60% of your viewership in season 1 and you only have 50% of your initial viewership at the start of season 2, it's going to be a hard claw to be viewed in the future as something.
Actually, I think that's the trajectory of most cult classics, actually.
Yeah.
I think most things that are popular and watched frequently, they're watched for the roller coaster of it. So, like, you look at Lost. People watched that. They came out in droves for it because they all expected for there to be a payoff at the end. But nobody went back and watched it a second time because of, like, they were so disappointed with the ending. Yeah. I think that, honestly, it's going to be true of Game of Thrones, too, unfortunately. People were so disappointed with the end of it that they're probably not going to go back and watch it a gajillion times.
We just go back and watch the first 4 or 5 seasons.
I mean, I do frequently, but no, I also wasn't as disappointed as most people with the end. But I think I think this is gonna follow more of the like, because even we might disagree with this, but there is a huge cult following for episode 1, episode 2, episode 3 of Star Wars. Mm-hmm. Like, there's people out there who hardcore love those, and they think those are Star Wars. And some of that's just because they came up on it. But, like Rocky Horror Picture Movie, that's like, it's one of those things that, like, was not popular at all. Most people are, like, way turned off by it. But it has such longevity because the fans who loved it, like, it's stuck around. It holds up to multiple viewings.
But I think people didn't like Rocky Horror Picture Show for a very different reason than why people don't like Rings of Power.
That's just an example. Yeah. But I think that typically what happens to, like, media that holds up long term is because it's built for an audience or for people to come around to it. Mm-hmm. And this, I don't know, this to me, because again, I was surprised how much more I liked this on second, third, fourth viewing. Like, I watched it the first time and I liked it, I had fun, but when I watched it more times afterwards, I was like, oh my god, I A, missed a lot, and B, was just kind of surprised with how much more I got out of it on the multiple viewings. So I was like, I'm hoping that continues for the later seasons, but we'll see.
I get more and more frustrated with it the more I watch it.
I'm sorry, dude.
So it has not had that effect on me.
Sorry, dude.
Orcs, Waldrig is at our Sauron. No? That's all I have for this scene. Do you have anything on here? So here's an example of maybe like Adar isn't the best morally centered person.
I mean, again, like, Lance, buddy, I love you, but that should have been clear from the onset.
Alright, I'm gonna jump ahead then if we don't have anything to talk about for this scene. Humans 2, archery, lift your aim.
Yes. Lift your aim, as in turn your head up. Little play on optimism and what the brothers quote, the brothers' advice was at the beginning with Galadriel. Lifting your eyes, being optimistic.
Oh, I think it's literally his shot was low, so he tells him to lift his aim.
Well, he tells him again after the whole like half stayed. So lift your aim. So he's saying like don't get stuck on like it's literally lift your aim, but then also when Theo says like half of us left, he says but half of you stayed. So lift your aim.
Yeah.
So that's when the double meaning comes in. It's
Alright, I'll give you that one. I have a note here. My old pole vault coach used to tell me, get your butt higher after I hit the bar, and I would think, yeah, no crap, tell me how. So Bronwyn's like gonna sell them out. Arendir talks her into not doing that. And then this, I'm sure it's happened on earlier episodes, and maybe I just didn't start really noticing it until now. But there are so many instances in this show where they do the like, someone says a line and then suddenly that line gives them the best idea ever. And this is one of them. She says like, this tower will fall, and then she like starts looking up at the tower, and then we find out why in the next episode. There's in the original movie The Italian Job, there's a line that Michael Caine gives where they're like teetering on the edge of a cliff in a bus, and they're trying to there's gold at the back of the bus, and there's people on the front of the bus, but they can't send the people to get the gold because then the bus will go over the cliff. And spoiler alert, the movie came out in like the 70s, so if this is a spoiler for you, whatever. This is at the end of the movie, and Michael Caine is standing in the middle of the bus, and he just goes, "Gents, I have an idea." And then they roll credits. Like, and it's one of the best endings to a movie ever. But just the way she's like, she says, "Oh, this tower will fall," and then she like looks up at it, it's like, "Gents, I have an idea."
Yeah.
It's a horrible idea, and we'll talk about it next episode, but she has an idea. Orcs. Oh. So I say, those orcs sure look like they're taking up the entirety of the only road that leads to the tower. We'll talk more about that in the next episode. Then we have Durin and Elrond. World-building fantasy colloquialism, enough of the quail sauce. What does that mean? Is it the opposite of strong gravy? But he acts like this is a bad thing too, and I thought strong gravy was bad. And then he says, "Give me the meat and give it to me raw." It's just a weird thing to say. I know what it means. It means get to the point and do it quickly. But that's just a weird thing to say.
Okay. It sounds weird to you. I was cool with it.
I know a lot of people that thought there was more to Elrond and Durin's relationship after that line. We'll just leave it there. And then once again, we know you didn't go to Khazad-dûm for friendship, but for ambition. Just another time Elrond defends the same line.
So I was gonna say in this though, it's kind of weird. It means like two things, but none of them mean the exact thing that he says. So he says, "I've been untruthful with you," or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
When actually, he hasn't necessarily been untruthful with him, especially not in the way that he is revealing. He says, I came there for ambition. That would have been true of him, but then he follows it up. He says, like, it's not my ambition, but I was there on pretenses of somebody else's ambition. So it's kind of like, it's like a half apology. Again, it's another one of those kind of like slimy, manipulative things that Elrond says that like it's said with the right intent, but it feels a little bit. It's definitely at the very least misleading.
Yeah.
It definitely feels a little bit emotionally manipulative because he's like saying like, so I haven't been entirely truthful with you. I was there for the mithril, but I didn't know I was there for the mithril.
Yeah. I thought I was there for the forge. Oh, I mean
But-
friendship.
so
I mean friendship.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean.
Yeah. So.
And then they say, we have to leave by spring or perish. Almost like he should have asked Celebrimbor why they need the forge by spring in the first place. And then. They don't have to die, they could just leave. They can't leave because they have to fight the evil that they banished Galadriel for fighting. He says they will start to dwindle away, so it's not going to happen instantaneously. So they've got time.
So I mean, this is one of those things. Is like on a macro scale here. Like, if the elves dwindle away, that's when Sauron wants to strike. He's gonna wait to spring the trap until the elves are all the way gone. But this could take generations of generations.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like working with different people's understandings. The elves don't know for sure that Sauron is back. They know something's up, but they don't know that Sauron is back and at work right now. But their strategy, their understanding is, oh, maybe he is still here, or something bad is still here. And we're not going, like, for them, time is, weird anyway. So they're like, but we will eventually go away. And when we go away, that's when evil will have run of the place.
Yeah.
Which doesn't actually line up with what's actually going in the world, but they don't know that yet. So it's kind of like yes and no.
Yeah. But again, it's one of those, like, in order for us as the audience to feel concerned about that, we need to have a harder timeline for it. So it's like by spring, we will start to fade and dwindle. But does that mean that if it's going to take us 1,000 years to finally fade and dwindle away, over the course of that 1,000 years, can we fight this evil and solve the problem before we go away? Over the course of that 1,000 years, can we find a solution to our mortality and bring it back? So, like, again, like we were talking about the other day, not on this, it feels like it's lowering the stakes instead of raising the stakes, even though it's supposed to be raising the stakes. And then I have "Oh Durin, you cheeky sod," when he's like, "Whose hands?" and he gives them the little, like, the fate of the entire Elvish race is in my hands. Me, poor lowly little me.
Yeah, Durin for Prez.
Yeah. Say that again. Whose hands? With a little side eye? With a little side eye?
That's just such a dwarven shot. They're just like the little side eye. So smug, so cheeky.
Yeah. That's like every shot of Gimli is him just like
exactly.
Back in Numenor, Halrand brooding. All right.
Can we take a moment to just commend how well this makeup holds up in all of these close-ups? Like, really, really. I also know that there's probably a lot of work done by the post team to take out seams and smudges and add freckles and pores and stuff like that. So I see you guys too, but like,
yeah, the makeup team does a good job.
We do so many close-ups in the shot of non-human characters wearing prosthetics that are just phenomenal.
So here, I'm going to jump ahead 10 seconds because I
this scene takes forever. See, so like armed guards show up to bring him. It's not him just like making this decision to go. He does come back for the coin purse. Read into that what you will, audience. So I think that's what you were talking about earlier with him like making the choice to go. It's like, well,
Yeah.
I mean, a guy with a spear, a fully armored guy with a spear came to take him. Here, I actually like the armor for the most part. I think lamellar armor is cool, and it's not something we get to see on screen very often. That having been said, the sleeves of the queen's like shirt that she's wearing under the armor looks like it's silk screen printed. You can't really see it in this because the advertising stuff is over it. I wish I could take that away so that I could actually see what I'm looking at.
You could see what you're looking at.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. Had they just given her like a black shirt to wear under, I feel like it would look better than see like her sleeves where it's wrinkling and it looks like it's just silk screened on. It's like she's literally wearing Under Armour under her armor. Oh, hey, look at that. They have shields in Numenor. Oh, but only for the 3 spearmen in the front, not anybody else. Even though they all use single-hand swords that should have a shield.
And spears.
And
you should be
spears.
happy to see.
I am. They don't use any of them, but I am happy to see them. Those are the only notes I have for this, is just the Queen's Under Armour, and you can tell by the depth of my voice I'm getting tired. So.
Yeah. I say my closing thoughts are, I love the emotional notes of this whole episode. This is again, like you pointed out a ton of valid points. Like there's some chinks in the armor, but it's it's just an emotional enjoyer of it. Like I enjoy all the emotional notes in this episode. I also do feel like though this is one of those episodes that builds up the red herring. It's one of the biggest like perpetrators for misleading the audience into believing that Halbrand is Sauron because of just his performance here. Mm-hmm. And it's necessary for their objective. It's maybe even effective for their objective, but on second viewing, and I would say maybe just as like I think that there was a better way to handle it that would have let us know on second viewing that this was always their intent. Like, because again, the actor's portrayal of Halbrand is so convincing. We want to believe that he is Halbrand because that's how he presents himself. Yeah. But
that's how he presents himself.
Yeah, that's how he does it. But anyways, I love this. Every time we get a Galadriel coming up, this is one of those things that like Galadriel is supposed to be a total babe, and she represents all things Elvish. So we see a little bit in all the other scenes where she comes up into a crowd, whether it be like literally straight out of the sea onto the deck, but the moment there at the end where she comes up and she has her hair blowing in the wind and she looks very Elvish, like is a little nod to like how she is in the book, where it's like, no, she is the prettiest, best, most BA, most elvy elf that like how we've built up the fantasy of elves is like when a mortal man sees an elf, they go, holy cow.
Like the first time I saw Maria Sharapova.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I really like this episode. It also contributed a lot to confusion amongst the audience, though. I feel like. Boo, yay.
Like, share, and subscribe. Comment. Tell us if you like us. Tell us if you hate us. Tell us if you hate to like us. Tell us if you like to hate us.
Cheers.